다 결혼하면서 내 출생에 처음에게 내 고노 넘버 타고 선배 전주초도 쌤께네 하는 데 주세요나스.
Now all of you in this room listen to the teaching very attentively with the cultivation of the altruistic mind, the enlightened mind of bodhicitta.
네, 다 가서 다도 좀 되면 나네. 근데 먼저 대당 되는 것이 자주 주도 샘게 받더니 되는 도스네 침벌에 되는 다 다른 게 값으로 되는 더 숨바티 내전에다 디시아레스 되는 더 숨바티 되는 갱은 람도 키로 왔어 그래. 대송도 가능성이 요래서나 되네 다 말한서 지단계 다 당보 소소게 다음에 봐라 다든지 되네 다든지 버텔라 때네 되네 인생게 나와 다 연구요래 소진이스 나외 나와도요 되네 텔라 때네 되네 다 동안나 뭐 나서지 다 말한서 연구요래 다조 말한서 남베 존에 세베이나 동안나 숨스드 근데 자반두지 동아리 동안 유로에 동안 넘버 숨 텐데스는 동안 넘버 나서 연구요 레스 대년도 나타 마루에도 동안 넘버 나서 연구요 레 대년의 값으로 되는 지단계 말하는 미 삼도 단단도 간지 고요르세나 되는 동안 대년의 값으로 되는 동안 대파 정거야라고 하지 되는 동안 대 도구이 만다고 하지 동안 대다 제고고요 만다고 하지 samtane tene the dungate ana khandeji chebe inaya ana chuduba inaya re 다가체 당기 두중하는 수역에 되나 내가 제가 간데스 시험이나 동해 대판 좀 고양다고 직선 안에 되네 드레스 제게요 그래서 근데 얘나야 근데 동해 대 되네 빠져 많이 소래.
So now back to the actual teaching of the 7-point mind training. We touched upon bodhicitta previously. Today we'll go on to the third point. And basically the third point, it explains with the slogan of that transforming all evil condition into bodhi path or enlightened path. Now to explain such is that because of not actually existing a concrete, solid self, we cling to the idea of existing such self and having labeled such existing of self, then we develop the dualistic notion of idea, existing self and other. Out of that very projection, then we are experiencing all
nyomumba tatambo nyomumba tel tene nyomumba sa nyomumba tene lesa lege number me be do number na so nyomumba.
We are experiencing all the various type of conflicting emotion to the effect accumulation of the negative karma by the force or the strength of the conflicting emotion. Then we experience also many different sufferings. In the Buddhist tradition, the sufferings are classified in the three different sufferings. The sufferings of the conditioned existence, the suffering plus suffering, and the suffering of changes. Now generally whenever we are going through any sort of suffering or unfavorable condition, our whole idea or goal and purpose, whether of practice or intention, is to get rid of that very suffering, to try to abandon that very suffering or pain. It is explained in the teaching. Suffering is not the thing that one should get rid of. Suffering is not the purpose or goal of our practice to get or eliminate or liberate from.
Te yungu yores, tene dongalti, tene njong kukutu samba. Te ma tsebeke, tene teta dongalti yang, tene chik chigi, tene jujin tendril tene yungu yoban rabachi. Dongalti, ya mena chi jujin tendril ine. Ya mena ni tene chen chige, tene dongalti sogo yoban rabachi. Hawa kurdan tin rabachi che. Ngone dongalti, tene sosuke da masune dungat khayin bade sosu hama go ba tendes yungu yores te indu tan thari tengen lamdo jursum ya da khansung go yores na chedang ge dungal se ya the tene khasa ore yabuji ke mare bena tamji dungal se we tsik thege mande ba chik ta khasa ore thege bena gawaji ge me ba chik tsik khora ben dungal se ge yore te yena yang tene dungal thi pena kengen lamdo jurs kengen sudu pena dungal thila tene ane dungal ki dukhayin bate le chor thuba hakho thuba chibugo yores this sedu pena tanda slogan tina khansos lelen thamche chigla da songare this sundu pena ta tindes jenta pena ngana zo lojong ka songare this sundu pena dungal tinde chunga ka so khatu ine chik senda childa 미치라 파 제게 같은 데는 아버지 맞아야지 tensu 탐제 되네 동알도 연구에 좀 센티 라니일 때는 연구요래 라니일 때는 간데서 연구했으나 다음에 발 다든지 되네 된zem발 때네 되네 니르처럼 또 같은 데를 게 되게 레서 될 때는 연구요래 삼베게 레렌 탐제 다 찍을 딱 송야티 라니 코나를 알아야 되면 딱 고요 송하네
and so it is explained that the object is not to eliminate or abandon the suffering. At the same time, we tend to also blame the pain or suffering of what we are going through is to someone else, to external being. And so either blaming to it someone else or whatever one is going through, which is a very much unfavorable state, one tries to get rid of that very suffering. Now, generally explaining that suffering is not any favorable thing. It's known as dukkha. And therefore, it is painful. Painful is not asking here to regard it is a positive, but pain is a negative thing. But then what we have to learn here is that in relating with the slogan of the transforming all evil condition into the bodhi path, we must also relate the very idea with the slogan, drive all blame into oneself, or more specifically to yourself. Now that every misfortune, suffering, pain, one must not blame it to someone else, to external being or person. The reason why we are experiencing this suffering is just because having fixation upon the existence of self, and therefore out of that self you develop, as we have explained, the dualistic mind, other. That other is divided as close, someone you love, and far, someone you dislike. So out of that, even dualistic mind of other, you separate closeness, someone you love, and you separate far, distance, that you dislike, and all the conflicting emotion is developed. And out of that you have created or accumulated negative karma. So that it is not the suffering we have to eschew, but it is the cause, the very root of suffering that we have to get rid of. That is the dualistic mind of clinging to the existing of self.
Oh, this re te indu tene this one tene dungal tela tene lam to care sita dungal tela tene 다 소소게 배나 셴라 마제베체 다 소소 배나 라 소소게 게 배나 노와 트루발 때네 엄마시발 때네 임바 소소게 하고바체 대담지 마체베게 때네 배나 소소게 동al 뇽아틀 때네 로심제 탐제 티나신게 동al 남바나 소고 뇽고요레 대손장 될 때네 소소게 셴기 동al 텔라 싸워체 삼베게 소소게 다 가서 우리 전죽섬 깨토바 제네 너나 동얼기 깽행바 동얼틸 람도 주르스드 텔라 때네 때네 전죽섬으로 같이 줄은 저걸 제바 제도 다 텔라 군접 전죽섬 토네 때바 대송요 하고송아
And so that based on the very experiencing you're undergoing, you try to look at that very suffering or pain from the positive angle, so to speak, not blaming that to someone else, but understanding it is because of your own clinging to the existence of self or ego. Therefore, whole reason of your undergoing this pain and suffering is your own confusion, ignorance, and the reason why you are making error or mistake is due to your own confusion, lack of elimination of the obscuration. In understanding that, you also understand that you are not only one who is undergoing such a confused state of mistakes, bewilderment and that of the pain, but all other living beings, that is limitless, they too are experiencing similar pain and suffering. In understanding that, then you try not to blame it upon other, but understanding it your own mistakes. And so
take matsebe dungalaya and blame majeps. Dungal the Majarangere, so the Ninjan Tene, Koke, we are Mata Dungalge, Dunga Yan Chuko Same Mahimba.
And at the same time, that not blaming upon others, you must not blame upon your pain or suffering itself. The whole idea of transforming all evil condition into bodhicitta is that very evil, that very painful condition. You must look at that from the brighter aspect, so to speak, not to blaming other or to the suffering, but rather understand very cause of that suffering, which is the dualistic notion of your clinging. And this is related to this is very much related to the relative truth, which through this relative truth understand
군접 잔죽 쌈들 잠닝제 다텔라 때는 잠닝제 개발체데 군접 담았으면 군접 잔죽 쌈 그런 것이 군접도 된다고 잔죽 쌈이요 여러분 군접 잔죽 쌈 얘기해요 그래서
So in this matter that one is able to develop or cultivate rather the relative truth or relative, bodhicitta, of the loving kindness, compassion upon living beings through the knowledge that they too are undergoing such a similar pain, suffering, confusion, and as a result of that, they too are making many mistakes and so forth.
대세, 대네 대땡도라 대네 돈담 전주 그 쌈나 간데스레스나 대네 대더게 대네 다조 동얼기 교암티 대네 디 다든 즘바트리 테네 다든 즘바티 간데스네 용고요르세나 테네 데코라 베나 다 생에디 파 육셰기 여버지단 돌셰기 여버 텐데지기네 좀 말해 당진 생에디 하장게 가서 그래 텐데지레 답에는 안한도 샘 코랑기 내루 데라 테네 모 동바 랑신 싸워 남바 망가버세야지 숨쉬어요 그래 테네 모 랑신 동바 임바테 하마고네 텔라 다 생해진지 남바 싸워티 하마고네 셴생해진진 테네 당신 니슨 짐바텔 때네 하고송아 텔라 당진 쓰게요 그래서 너나 텔라 뭐마시바 땀 때네 당진 쓰게요 그래서 대인도 테네 된담 전주기 샘롬부치기 가장 시에바는 신기 샘 코랑기 테네 내루다 삼노 따네 도스 제연도 테네 베나 다든 짐바티 테네 남바나 가서 오래 잘 나서 스트로와 쓰기요래 되네 다 망가바다 되네 나바 나서 스트로고요 됐음자 되네 너나 되네 나서 스트로 주고스는 꾸숨게라시 임바라 되네 또 봐지 같이 가나 되는 또 그거 열었으나 그냥 대답을 동을 때네 되는 동을 그 유튜브 통는 진도 봐 어다 경에 잔줄 남도 교수야 된다는 배 잔줄 쓴 돈에 도수 줄 거고요 그랬어.
So then relating towards the ultimate bodhicitta, now the whole idea of the fixation, clinging to the idea of self or I, simply having understood it intellectually, you cannot throw it away, you cannot abandon such, you cannot leave it behind, simply with the knowledge that is very the cause or root or pain or suffering. The whole idea of the dualistic notion has to be understood or realized, that the complete nature of ourself, the essential nature of ourself or the mind is emptiness. Having not understood that essential nature of our mind is emptiness, we label that as me, I, existing, the solid or concrete being. The essential nature of our mind, which is emptiness, it has also its one aspect of this mind is clarity or luminosity. And not having recognized the luminosity aspect of the mind, we have again labeled the existence or belief of existence of others or phenomenal self. Other does not simply mean person, but existing of phenomenal as well. So out of that, what has created or what we call as the dualistic mind. So actually that very idea of the dualistic mind is the emptiness and the clarity nature of such. Now because it is emptiness and clarity, anything can rise, manifest within that unobstructed nature of the emptiness, which is clarity. So one has to recognize or realize those three stages as emptiness, clarity, the manifestation of anything within that essential nature of the emptiness and clarity as the Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. One cannot simply reject the idea of dualistic mind, but one can recognize or realize that state. So that is accordance or related with the absolute bodhicitta.
대송자 단 너나 경에 장주기 다 그냥 숨바데 경에 장주기 남나 교수도 되네 대 가서 그래 다 경연바 되네 소소게 동알라소가 된수 탐제를 때네 되네 군접 장주기 셈을 붙이 대당 되네 된담 장주기 셈을 붙이 되네 깨버제가 동알생이 두부를 있으면 많이 봐 동알 때네 되네 동알 셰버자서 동알 때네 되네 된수
So the whole idea of this transforming evil condition into body path in very short is that based on the suffering, through experiencing pain and suffering, not blaming everything upon other, even to the pain itself, but using that very pain or suffering as a path to understand that ultimate nature of what we have talked about, the Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya, and that of Nirmanakaya aspect. So that is what actual meaning of that adverse or the evil condition should be transformed into bodhipath.
대체, 되네 다 시바티, 다 숨바티 경에 남도죠. 시바티 세직도 냠nen도 좋아서 말해. 대순도 저 강한송고요, 그랬나? 안에 다 전주기 셈을 붙이 대 되네 그나 곰베게 내가 삼지당 되네 야 소수게 갈락한 점지 곰 되네 샤샤반다고 마임바 셋직라 되네 전주기 셈을 붙이 대 냠nen도 잘 보고요 그래 대수운도 강한송고 열었으나 되네 개체슈데 다래 되게 값소라 되네 샴페인기 셈 깨베 값소라 되네 셴랑라 되네 랑케 심제 셴기 동아 탐제 되네 당도 레네 tene sem nu sambeke tene sosuke semla min pobanda botida yishidi tene pemmas ke chembres akoso datso kanso still top nga singe ti go yosongale pembe top singe data tene tendes songyo pembe top sonyade sambat ke chembu yisungdu kanso go yorasena pena simje shenla pembe drube kapsula 당보 소스 패션의 펜버 줍 삼백에 배나 2000더버지 매버이나 근데 배나 툭도 마툭도 된대서야지 된대요 말아 그래서 혼자 가는 소를 시에는 펜버 줍 누비게 네버요래 뉴요래 배나 가사시에 배나 신기 잠닝지게 란시 레스게 라바임바 그래서 혼자 유드 될라 소스게 이체당 되고요래스.
So the next is explanation upon that the mind training is not only designed to apply only when you are meditating. Mind training is designed to apply upon you in your whole or regular life. So therefore, it must be regarded as your total day-to-day activity, not only as a practice during the session. Must regard it as the practice during the post-meditation as well. As such, that whole the idea of the mind training is based upon, again, in benefiting, helping others. That first, one also has to learn what is known as developing 5 strengths. But in order to develop the 5 strengths, or in order to able to actually help living beings, that the whole notion of the idea, inspiration to help other is necessary, wanting to benefit other is necessary. That is inspiration. At present we have talked, we have seed to benefit other, but we have not developed the strength to benefit other. So you must not mistake that.
다 전주 그 semrom bichi gomde shempe gugu yore yina yenge tup da matup tende yo mar sam ran ran yi machi ba yisi me tende ma yima bana pen tup ko re sam bachi ge tene nge ge sheng ge sam pamba drum nu sam bachi ge so yisi gugu yore sta kap thela.
So therefore at this point what is necessary in us is self-confidence, because thinking I know it is necessary in the mind training to benefit living being, but I cannot, I have no capacity to benefit other. That sort of thought is not proper in this particular mind training. You must have self-confidence according to the teaching, as explains that we have to benefit living being. I can, I will, I have the capacity to benefit other. That sort of confidence, self-confidence is necessary, because as I have explained earlier, a few days ago, that we have natural seed, essence of loving kindness, compassion within ourselves.
This jene indu tene samba tigi tingtula tene sosu ke tuda namba kundula ro ndu nyal cha chönam khan cheba inaya tene pena samba tsamji mayimata this jene samba thangbude tene samba tsamji ma chebe ke tene samba tigi ngoso sosu ke lu ma yi sumji gone shenla tene pemba khatse inaya 단 정도 녀자 좀 간데 값수 있나 좁투바 제네 독스 제바텔라 세직을 냠는 좋아스 제네 다트레스 데레스다.
Having inspired yourself to work to benefit all living beings with some notion of self-confidence, then in your regular life, whatever, regardless of what you engage in, whether you're working, sitting, sleeping or eating, you must not let your mind be absent from wanting to benefit living beings. Not only that you should not be absent from wanting to benefit living beings, but in all these activities of work, sitting, sleeping or eating, you must actually try to benefit from your physically, verbally and mentally, whatever that is within your capacity to help others, according to that. Based upon your confidence that you can, you want to work for the benefit of living beings, then upon that, whatever capacity you have, you must help other with your physically, verbally, and mentally.
tela tene shiba tse ta la nyamle na chero chelo wasen te sungu yo res.
So that is known as lifelong a practice or applying of the practice upon oneself.
tene ngaba te ta lo jong ngaba te lon jong be tse sungu re. tene lon jong be tse sungu ya ti tene bena ta lo jong yondu lo de kase de jong yu me ke tse sungu yo re. tene 제단 게 tene ngaran zo chue kande je nyamle cheba yina yang tene twanda ning bu de kan resena tene sem druam tene danzi shiwar cheba ti tene chue ke twanda ning bu res benata melare be ke songare chun dawan do nge ma chiran sum kyong bun do ndorwa yes chene songbare tene rang sem den dor tu bu yo res tene ma chebe sanje jomne de ke songbare tene dikbache me je shin ke wa phusum so ba rang sem ni yong sum dor den sanje temba ins tene rang sem yong sum dor so ba zo sanje jom den de temba res tene loz tuba che che tela ben rang sem dor mayin be ke loz tuba ke chela ben da jawa je bu da khaya yo re te son za yindu bena te yindu ta lon jong be che ma che se ya ji yo ba te tene bena 단다 슬로건을 송부터를 최근 공부 찍든 되어 송래 최 탐지의 공부 찍든 되면 있어야 돼 당지 시월 제가 되는 되면 있어 전 송고요 그래서.
So the next is really the measurement of the lojong, or the fifth is the measurement of the mind training. Now measurement is a sense of how much you have accomplished out of such practice. Whole idea of every practice, including the lojong or mind training, is designed to pacify the ego clinging. Every dharma, even in the, or the mind cling, to pacify the mind. In the Milarepa's teaching, he explains that I do not want to touch upon the subject of the Vinaya or Sutayana. Whole idea of every practice is to pacify the mind. And in the Buddha's teaching, putting it very short, it explains that no act of unwholesome action whatsoever. Practice the virtue completely, pacify your mind, that is Buddha Dharma. So having put whole Buddha's teaching into 4 lines, it is aimed to pacify our mind. So to relate that very idea with the slogan is that all Dharma agrees at one point. The reason is that all Dharma, regardless of the different tradition, different vehicles, they all aim towards the one, that is to pacify mind, or in other words, to get rid of ego cleaning.
this re te indu te son za te son re tene fang bo ni je zo song song re te son de bena chi ge namba ha go song tene lon jong be ge che de chi ge namba zam jil tene ru mes nang ge tene danzi shima shil tene rung yo res te son za indu tene bena ka se ore fang bo ni je zo song song de tene mi ge ta chana lo jong sha 다 빼야고 렌도 근데 저나 빼도 도 세와탐지게 텔라 이제 많이 받체네 방문이 좀 소소는 러니게 근데 나은게 돌도 면도 따네 당진도 충으로 친도 면도 따네 텔라 방보수네 근데 로종 그 세대 샤고요 그래서 근데 당진도 충으로 친 근데 현라 제버는 좀 숙체로 친 근데 중소나 땡땡 로종이 세요고요 그래서 로종이 따です대면은 tene lojong yo mares te sonza yindu ta pangbo dorna tene lojong ge che sonya de kang sung yo res na tene ti lojong be ge ta tela tene remji ge dangjin de chung ro tene shen la jeban zin ba de che ro ne tene changju ge sem de ta ge ne shuk che ro yo res.
And therefore that whole idea of the measurement of the practice of mind training, you must not judge from the people or outer people what they say, or you must judge from the compliments by the people. So to relate that with the slogan, it says that of the 2 judges hold to the principle one. Now, when you are practicing, applying any sort of practice, particularly as dealing with the mind training, if someone else compliments you, saying, you have really done good lojong or mind training, you seem to have pacified your mind. Because I see your behavior are very gentle, calm. Don't take that serious. That is the not perfect judge. Who is the perfect judge of those is yourself. You try to analyze or examine yourself. How strong your ego is. Has your ego or clinging, the pride, has been diminished from the moment or time you have applied this lojong? Is your cherishing for other is stronger than before? If yes, then the lojong is working in you. So you have to judge yourself rather than letting someone else to judge. So that's what whole meaning of the two judges. Hold to the principle one.
Tene tema sebe lonjong be sete benata champagne to samba drube capsula tam sam drandriba sam mandriba tan sam dunga bena soso the be kaleda tendes yungo yores bena theta vyuki dunga da kenge bala soba khande ji inaya the capsula tene samba de tene jigbata trawaji tene pamashu pachi tiki hat catching breast mamadi tene bena soso ge robache tubata soso gasanyesa yena tene chebache tene gasanyesa mayimba tenzola majebache tene ya che lella boyo tenzo robache lojonga yesi tene majeba tenzo gange yeba ta yonsa maresone ta somebody pashu mala so tende yungo tende mayimba chi ta dona jikba 탐제 da trawachi 지 중소나 tene genge gande chi kapsul 중소나 ya tene jikba mebachi yena tene koran pemba tubala tene namya tene chinge mebachi chuna de lonjonga se momateres.
And the second form of testing yourself, of the measurement of the mind training, is that again the idea of the mind training is your wanting to benefit living beings with the confidence and trying to benefit them to whatever capacity you have physically, verbally and mentally. Now, as the situation of samsara, sometimes your helping works and sometimes it does not work. Regardless whether what situation you are in, working or not working, you're trying to help is proved to be helpful or not helpful. If your will to help other is not destroyed, if you're never encouraged by the misbehavior of other, negative circumstances of the environment, and if you're not discouraged by your lack of capacity to help, if you have always courage to help, even you seem to not have the complete capacity to provide every need of sentient being, that is also a measurement of mind training in you, because you have a strong courage, willpower that is unshakable.
Bena tanda Chungparam Bichege Kyanzo Shambhala training tendena sungdoa jikpa meba kansa gyawasing sungdo warriors oti tanda ngone tanda teres.
It is the real meaning of what Vidyadhara has expressed or explained in the Shambhala training, fearless warrior. The whole meaning of fearless warrior is that you are a warrior that is fearless who is not shakeable from the outer circumstances and inner your mental capacity, but you are always fearless and you are a warrior. And constantly striving to benefit living beings without fear.
This is on that is on that, but this on the channel pember to what tendency social chumbi capsule money then the lojong says do lojong says.
So when you have such warrior-like mind or fearless mind of the warrior a person, that is the accomplishment of lojong, mind training.
대세 tene 다 두바데 로종게 담색 송하래 tene 로종게 담색데 가능성이 요랬으나 tene 제단게 tene 로 잔주 그 셈나 로 중앙티 tene 다 베나 시엔라 펜바 코널 때레 대 인도 대손자 담색데 가능성이 요랬으나 대라 베나 로 중앙티 시엔라 펜바 주바테 때네 tene 소소게 직된 최제의 만들어가지고 보고요. 그래서 사고는 무슨 최제의 만들어가지. 됐어도 tene 소소게 명다 년자도 전라서보다 만들어가지. 됐으나에 되면에 tene 가는 표현이 깨나 최송세 그러봐. 최송 최송세도 tene 단다 좀비치 탭지 날 센 직송이요 가는 거. 최고 교세야지 봐. 어때 어딘데만 받지. 단 너나 시엔라 펜바 좀네 되게 소소하게다 마음발에 야구지 연구를 삼바다. 되게 많이 받지게 근데 대단 자와지. 다 너나 시엔라 펜바디 근데 투모 많이 베게 빼나 오늘 맞추베게 신뱅이 쓴다는 거지. 고요. 그래서
So the sixth is really the advice on the
맞다. 담색.
The sixth is the samaya vow, or it's not samaya, excuse me, the vow, the commitment of the lojong. Putting the commitment of lojong in very short, brief explanation is that as long as that if you practice lojong without letting yourself involve in the 8 worldly dharmas, then you are keeping the very precept of the lojong. In other words, in keeping the precept of lojong is also that you try not to become too materialistic, rather than cutting through that whole idea of materialism, and therefore not clinging or attaching to the 8 worldly dharma. 8 worldly dharma is having more notion of your fame, possession and wealth, so forth. If you do not have such, then you are maintaining or keeping the very vow of the lojong. Although that if you read the very book of the mind training or lojong, there are many precepts. But putting all the precepts into very short, brief idea to understand is that if you do not indulge, involve yourself in the 8 worldly dharma, that is the basic explanation of the lojong's path.
tene demba lojong ge lapseres. 다 lojong ge lapseti 다 가자네 대립한테 lapseres. 다 배나 잔주 그 셈을 좀 깨버려. 시에나 펜버 두고레스야 돼. lojong ge lap자. 다 dem바데. 제제 tene 예나야 다 쪼원다버데 lap세나는 쪼원다버데 tene 가담베 기회 신인 쪽에 간전세게 요랬잖아. 듣는 게 요래. 배나 다 다른 소수의 님의 공라. tene 건다 많이 예래베 값술라. tene 쇼게네 숭데 tene 건다 말에 파도라 tene 계획이 남도 가제시한도 tene 미계획이 남도 가제시하도 tene 계획을 가제주도 미계획을 가제주도 텐조지 소수게 tene 배나 대시에다 바이오게 땡네 하고서 다 로종 글랍세트 쪼데 tene 대시에 바이오게 토네 tene 배나 소수근로 가두이나양 tene 잔주 그 셈을 좀 붙이다 맞아와 제야 돼 대시 땡야 돼 다 로종 글랍세 쪼는 거들 tene 대야 사고도 tene 배나 계획시 가담의 계획신이 그 텐덴자의 소리요래 tene 소수게 배나 텐데스 지야 때문에 tene 다른 데가지 제자 소수 다들 미제 삼백 담자 양의 양도 쟤네 tene 산이 테나 신신의 림지림지 tene 배나 소수 줄 다시 따네 텐데스 쟤네 제바들이 다 로종 클럽잖아요. 단도도 뭐만 좋은 다 대시된 바들.
So the 7th point, the mind training is what I have said from the very beginning of this seminar until now. That is the instruction of the mind training. What I have instructed to you is always work to benefit living beings. Always try to avoid anything that is harmful to self and that of all a living being. So that is being the instruction. The 7th point being the instruction of the lojong. The lojong instruction is to work, to benefit, and to avoid any harm. But to add to such, that accordance with the Kadamba's system of the Lojong practice, maintaining what we have already talked in your mind, that the system of the Kadamba practitioner is that throughout the day, at the evening, they contemplate, sit in meditation, so to speak, and think what positive actions that they have done from the morning that they woke until now at the bedtime. What negative actions that they have done from that moment of waking up to the going to the bed. So, contemplating upon that, they develop also the mindfulness and awareness that if they have engaged more on the negative actions of the body, speech and mind, that they try to avoid such happening in next day. And so in that way they maintain a very fresh or
가시게 답변은 디우트리스 로그에게 녹수에서 남도 개회 남도지 텐데 디우 깔보시샤 미개회 남도지 텐데 디우 나고시샤 텐데게 선배게 너나 다 잔주스는 로중스도 근데 배나 탑나마 나초베게 고네 템퍼처
could call as a clear mind, so that you try to think or contemplate upon all your activities of the days, positive or negative, so that you develop a clear mindfulness and out of that awareness. There is also a system according to the Kadamba that to experience more of the what actually you have engaged in of the positive and negative action. They have a collective collection of white and black pebbles. So when they think of the one positive action that they have done, they put one white pebble, and when they think of the negative action, black pebble, and they look at which one heaps or piles more. And that is also one sort of tradition, technique of the Kadamba. Now what does it really help is to develop the mindfulness and awareness. Looking at that, you know how much in the negative side you have engaged in. So bring the awareness that it is helpful. So therefore, it is not bad idea if you collect pebbles.
아니 다도 시신 참한테 되네 안가디 저 다는 장군 송 되네 된는 고란 게 요래 되네 대된도 여러분 책임이 맞순 샤를 텐데 요래 되는데 스티브 된도 좀 야고 제나 되네 야고 있는 거였어 안 좋아요 나타 마셔.
So I have sort of explained very briefly the 7-point mind training of the based upon the commentary of the Njomgon Kondu the Grades. And although the explanation is very brief, but there are many other teachings and books and also very teaching of the Vidyadhara that is available for you further to understand such if one is more interested. And this is actually simply giving you the very transmission of the blessing, and so if you are interested in furthermore study and learning, you must learn from such teachings. And so if you have any questions, if you have any questions, you're welcome. But most important of all of Lojong is you have to really practice Lojong rather than learning. Practice.
Raymond, last night you were talking about exchanging self for others, and I'm curious if there's a way to practice that exchange when you're actually in the presence of others. For instance, if you're with a friend who's sad or angry, or even if you're walking on the street and see someone who seems to be suffering. Is there a way to practice that?
T capsula taten bena semge tamje mayimbe te ngus pembetushin rigdo has.
At that time, instead of practicing mentally, why don't you actually try to help him or her?
It's simple to ask.
Much simpler.
I was brought up in a Christian tradition which taught me to lack any respect for myself, and also held up an ideal of martyrdom or self-crucifixion and self-blame. Now I know that it's a distortion when I hear it that way, but I keep hearing, blame yourself, not others. And I do. And this makes it worse because I cling to a negative beating up on myself, which is as dualistic as anything, as the opposite. And it's really stopping me from things like the bodhisattva vow, because I hear it as permission to be harsh with myself.
Dit chantes konotes. Bena nangbege soso soso lai bena blame chis namya sigyo res. Kana sigyo resena tene blame tamasuna kan guguyo resena tene da mebala da dunzimba tene da dunzimba tegil tene yung bena yung res dungal gi jodum masuna ti but ngoshe ba chis sigyo remato tene bena soso machung res soso blame chene bena duksa res chene sam sigyo mares da bena dungal gi jodum masuna ti kai ba ngoshe res dungal gi jodi khanesna kunjung se ata nan chuge ge chebina kunjung temba se ata ti khanesna ti leda nyomo ni nyomo yo re ti dadun zibelten yo yo res ti sonzo ti imba de moshe ba chis yo res tangbo.
According to Buddhism, it really does not explain about blaming to yourself. I know you're thinking, we translated that earlier to yourself, right? So in the Buddhism, what is explaining here is really to understand or blame it to the clinging, the grasping. Because of that clinging and grasping, you have developed the fixation of existing I or self. That is one that you have to understand, rather than His Eminence says blaming. Understand that is the root, the cause of all suffering. Not that yourself. So as the cause of that is the suffering, then all the idea. So that is whole idea how whole the subject of the karma and its result is being expressed. Since that the awareness or understanding of that very fixation or clinging to the idea of self is necessary, when you have that understanding, then also Buddhism explains or gives the method of liberation. So therefore it gives, also in Buddhism, it gives a confidence.
That blame tamji mayimba tatila bena to tubega nubayeba.
So therefore you have a capacity to liberate from the very cause of pain and suffering. So there is no really something that you blame to yourself forever. You have the capacity in Buddhism given as to liberate, but first you have to understand what caused you to experience the suffering.
Sometimes in Tonglen, I may do the exchange the opposite way, I may discover a clinging to a harsh truth and
Clinging to, sorry?
in exchange of self and other, frequently I will be able to have more confidence when I allow myself the same kindness to myself as others. Is this okay? I mean, I will see that I would do this to another, therefore I might do it for myself. Is that, I know it's still dualism.
되게 와です.
Yes, yes.
때나 나랑 노종 값을 쉐어를 당보 고츠야 돼. 그는 소소하게 파면다보다. 되면은 소소하게 마음배 동안 텐스 단단히 수네 동네 텐스 고미야 되게 와です. 지소요 와です.
Yes, that's fine. In the Lojong mind training, it explains that one must begin one's practice of the Lojong or mind training. First, either someone who is very close to you, one's parents and so forth, or even taking upon oneself the pain and suffering of future of yourself first. So it is expressed that you can practice that way.
The pain and suffering of yourself, I'm sorry, could you
Of
just
your
repeat?
future. Let me try this way. It explains that either you, at the beginning of the practice of Lojong, you can concentrate upon someone who is very close to you, like a parent, or that you can also concentrate, practice by contemplating the taking upon yourself the suffering of your future suffering, right now, so that you don't have future suffering.
We can't really expect to actually take on the suffering of others and to give happiness to others until we've reached a more advanced state of seeing. And that confidence in our practice of giving and taking is very important. Now, in our beginning exercises in taking and sending, what are we accomplishing if we're practicing this? What are we having confidence in accomplishing? If we're keeping our mother or our parents as a beginning view of taking their suffering and giving them happiness.
되게 David Terrace accomplished the team we always. And tell a jungle tene, and then say I did tunda tenderes. And a Kashege sigdons. Then a lojon, then a stone to scombal tene, then a change tungalti, then they learn to be your vest and I should to attend the young rest. Then a this to do Nay can to say at it. Handa let Hamubagi lojon the gomba zamjiki shank donga land to rest in a sigio mares. Yenaya shank donga land tubala, lojon gomba latene, then shank donga land to the tender young yours, accomplished the team yours. Carres and take on the young yours and tell Pena Kunzob Chanjuk Sem, Penata Hambutone Gomdu, then a Kunzob Chanjuk Sem, Tene, Gomguore, take gomba latene, then a tardo to them Chanjuk Sem the Gil Jigores. Get to do, then the tennis don't land to the Rang Devotion, then Liberty, Junguiores. The Gunzo of Tesfonza, Gunzo and Madame Hamilton, Domin Suyati, Gunzo Tenet and Chanjuk Sem Gigores.
The reason why I said that is because that many people ask the very question of the idea of the Tonglen practice, sending and receiving, that they think simply doing it at the first time, they would have really capacity to remove the suffering, illness of other and give very happiness of self to other. As with that, as such idea to eliminate such misunderstanding, and also there are other who also expresses their problem with the Tonglen practice, because thinking that in taking upon oneself the suffering of other, they actually are afraid of the very suffering coming onto themselves or the illness. So they are suffering phobia. in many sense, and as a result to such that prevents them from practicing the Tonglen, to eliminate both misunderstanding that I explained yesterday, that based upon the Tonglen that we do, that is the basic building of the foundation, the accomplishment, what you, as the question to your, the answer to your question, what will we accomplish? The accomplishment is that through such a training over and over, based upon the relative bodhicitta, then you actually develop the ultimate sense, the capacity to actually take upon the suffering, give happiness, that to develop, to accomplish that whole capacity. We have to depend at present in our ordinary state, it's a simply mind training form. So to eliminate those two misunderstandings, I explained that way.
Sanje namje yonso shin duje leja pangre shu simje tamje de dai de ngero tamje ta do tongre shu chanju semba khanda sar shu se da kunje malam ru para